A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards, and I am glad that you've joined us on the program today. We're going to be talking about the right of the people and the growing number of people exercising their right to keep and bear arms. Larry Keane joins us in just a moment, Senior Vice President and General Counsel of the National Shooting Sports Foundation. We're going to be talking about the record number of firearms sold in the United States. The final NICS numbers coming out on Monday afternoon. According to the FBI, there were roughly 39 million, almost 40 million NICS checks performed over the course of 2020. Now, not all of those involve gun sales, as we'll talk about with Larry, but the NSSF, they always take a look at those raw numbers, and then they adjust the figures. They're able to look at the codes that are used as, well, that was for a permit check, that was for a gun sale, and they estimate, again, 21 million guns sold in the United States in 2020, and a staggeringly large number of new gun owners as well. What kind of impact will those new guns and those new gun owners have on the gun control debate? We explore that and more in our conversation with Larry Keane. Take a look and a listen. Larry Keane, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program. It's great talking with you today.
Always a pleasure to spend time with you, Cam. I hope you're well and staying healthy.
I am doing my best, yes, sir, and I hope the same for you in 2021. You know, 2020 was a pretty awful year for a lot of people for a lot of reasons, but for the firearms industry, it was a record setter. I mean, this is amazing. According to the NSSF adjusted estimates, 21 million firearms sold in the United States in 2020. That's 30% higher than the previous record set back in 2016. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is the highest number ever achieved in the history of the NICS adjusted figures. Really unprecedented. And I think it's important to point out, Cam, that among the 21 million firearms sold, based on the estimate, our survey data tells us that there are 8.4 million first-time gun buyers in 2020, which is pretty incredible. That almost 8.5 million people chose to exercise their fundamental constitutional right secured by the Second Amendment for the first time. That is a lot of new gun owners. Just unprecedented.
It really is. And so I know that the way that the NSSF reaches that estimate, you do surveys with gun store owners, with gun store employees. You're talking to folks within the industry. I'm curious. I mean, that sounds like about 40% of gun sales were going to these new gun owners. How does that compare to years past? Obviously, the raw number of new gun owners is staggeringly large, but as a percentage of firearm sales, is that 40% figure also a lot higher than it has been in the past few years?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in 2016, for example, roughly 25% of customers were first-time buyers, according to our survey data from retailers across the country. And so this is unprecedented at 40%. And of that 40% figure, roughly 40% were women purchasing firearms for the first time. And we saw very large increases in different demographic categories. For example, African Americans was about 58% year over year increase. Asian Americans, something like 38% increase year over year. So just unprecedented growth in the industry and incredible numbers of first-time buyers across all demographics. And so, it was really just remarkable.
Absolutely.
And we think it will have long-term impact, not just on the industry and on the sports, but on self-defense. And we think in terms of public policy, because many of these first-time gun buyers have come off the sidelines. They chose to protect their family and their rights over listening to scare tactics of gun control groups that try to scare you out of purchasing a firearm. And so hopefully these people become gun voters.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of these...
I don't know, Georgia.
Right? Yeah, well, we're definitely keeping our fingers crossed that happens in Georgia. But, you're right. I mean, I don't see these 8.4 million Americans who purchased a firearm for the first time in 2020. I don't think many of them did that as a short-term rental, thinking, well, I'm gonna have my gun now until they come and take it away. You're right. These were folks who, in many cases, they may have been weighing this for years, but the unrest and the rise in crime kind of drove them to purchase a gun for the first time in 2020. Others, may have just decided, I've never wanted to own a gun before, but I want to own a gun now. Whatever their reasons, now that they're embracing their rights, I don't care if they're a Republican, if they're a Democrat, if they're an independent, if they've never voted before. Hopefully, they're now paying attention to what's going on with the attacks on the rights that they're now choosing to exercise. And I want to talk about those long-term impacts, but I want to go back for just a second, because when I reported on the NSSF's figures yesterday on social media, there was a reporter from CNBC who replied and said, do you think those numbers would be even bigger if it were not for, the fact that inventory was just wiped out? So let me ask that question to you, Larry Keane of the National Shooting Sports Foundation. Do you think we would have had even more than 21 million firearms sold in the country last year were it not for the fact that the surge in gun purchases was so large that, existing inventory basically got wiped out pretty early on in 2020?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I regularly get phone calls from friends, family members saying, hey, I can't find, what I'm looking for, where I could get it, look at ammunition, and, hard to find ammunition. And because the factories are running at full capacity, trying to keep up with demand, but, it's just basic economics. Demand outstrips supply. And, so yes, absolutely. The number would have been considerably higher if there was more inventory, but who could have predicted a once-in-a-century global pandemic and the concern over public safety that would arise? Who could have predicted the defund the police movement and the rioting and unrest that has gone on in major American cities and the incredible spike in violent crime and murder in many of these cities that has caused people to go out and purchase a firearm. And again, the survey data makes it very clear. The primary reason people are purchasing firearms, particularly first-time buyers, is concern for their personal safety, the safety of their family, due to all that's gone on. And we anticipated there would be an increase in sales tied to the election. It always seems to be the case, but this started very early in the year when the pandemic really set in say March, but it has just continued unabated right on through the year, and I don't see it letting up. I mean, the pandemic is still with us. We're going to see potentially unrest in Washington, D.C. this week. From what we're reading, and demand is still very strong. It hasn't subsided, even though 2020 is now in hindsight.
Yeah.
Where it belongs.
Right. No, but you're right. I mean, the factors that cause the surge in gun sales, while the calendar is flipped, those factors are all still with us. And, unfortunately, I think are going to be with us for quite some time. And to that end, I know that a number of ammunition manufacturers, I think Jason Hornady released a video a couple of days ago. The CEO of Remington released a video talking about and just sharing with the customers and with gun owners, look, here's what's going on. Here's why you're not able to find a lot of ammunition. And we promise you that we're working hard. We promise you we're going out and
right.
we're trying to increase our capacity as much as we can, but we can't just go out and build a new factory overnight. There've been some conspiracy theories that have been floated around that maybe the government's buying up all of the ammo. The government wants to, get in the way of gun owners being able to purchase this stuff. And I was glad to see that the industry addressing some of those concerns, because really, I mean, what you said a couple of minutes ago, I think is the key here. This is simply a matter of supply and demand. You don't need to find some sort of conspiracy theory to account for the lack of ammunition on the shelf. You can point to 8 million new Americans who also now want ammunition. As well as, the existing before, exactly, right? So I mean, is that truly what's going on? Is it really just a matter of supply and demand at this point?
It really is that simple. We've seen these, conspiracy theories that pop up. We saw that a couple of years ago when there was a spike in demand for ammunition. There was this theory that was never true, that somehow the Department of Homeland Security was buying all the ammunition so that civilians couldn't have ammunition. That was not true then. It isn't true now. There is no grand conspiracy to suppress supply to raise prices. I mean, it makes no economic sense. Why would a manufacturer with rising demand decide to reduce production and not to sell to those customers? That it just doesn't make any economic sense. The Homeland Security conspiracy theory was based on a misunderstanding about government supply contracts that, the way they're written, but it was never true then, not true now. No one is, the manufacturers are not engaged in a conspiracy amongst themselves, which would be a violation of antitrust law to suppress supply. In fact, one company would be very happy if another company decided not to produce, and they would capture that market share. So,
yeah, absolutely.
It is just economics 101, supply and demand. Demand currently outstrips supply. It is you can't build a factory overnight. And as has been explained in a number of those videos, you can't just hire a worker, put them on the production line, and, you have to train them up. That's true on the ammunition side. It's true on the firearms manufacturing side. I had a conversation with Tom Sullivan, who runs the Ruger factory, about precisely that point, that, they're hiring, but it takes time to get people hired and trained to where they can, contribute to production. So, that's just the reality of the market. No one is suppressing supply.
Yeah. All right. Now let's talk about those long-term impacts of these 8.4 million new gun owners. Probably, again, going to be close to 9 million, I'm guessing, by the end of January. Do you think that this will have an impact, first of all, on anti-gun politicians? Are they taking notice of the fact that, Joe Biden, for example, is calling for a ban and compensated confiscation of modern sporting rifles? Several million of those rifles were sold in the United States in 2020. This is the most popular, most commonly sold centerfire rifle in the country today. Do you think this can have an impact on the anti-gun agenda in Washington, D.C. this year?
If the gun control community is not taking note of the fact that there are nearly 8.5 million new gun owners in 2020, and as you say, that number, will continue January and on, then they are really foolish, because it will have an impact. Even if, let's say, just half of those new firearms owners consider the gun laws that they encountered for the first time and how it impacted their ability, law-abiding Americans, to exercise their rights, and how it has no impact on reducing crime. Just if half of those people engage politically and vote their rights, that will have a tremendous impact on legislation and policy moving forward. And you're right, modern sporting rifles are by far the most popular rifle being sold in America today. That's been true for over a decade. There are in excess of 20 million of these modern sporting rifles in the possession of law-abiding Americans just since 1990. They've been on the market, the civilian market, since at least 1963. And, these are very popular. People use them for target shooting, for home protection, and increasingly for hunting. So it'll be interesting to see in this new Congress whether Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the Biden-Harris administration pursue these policy objectives legislatively or otherwise in the face of this surging number of new gun owners in the United States.
All right, last question for you, Larry. Public comment ended on Monday for this proposed rule by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. This is basically, ensuring that there is no discrimination on the part of large financial institutions against disfavored industries like the firearms industry. This public comment period, I just checked here. According to regulations.gov, there were 6,392 comments received on this proposed rule. I haven't had a chance to read through all 6,300 of them to see how many were in favor, how many opposed, but that seems like a really strong response to this proposed rule. What are the next steps, and when will we know whether or not this rule change will be adopted or not?
Yeah, so I haven't read them all either. That'd be a pretty daunting task, but I have kind of popped in and just sort of perused comments every day as they were coming into the electronic portal. And I would say initially there was anti-gun comment driven by a grassroots alert from Guns Down America. But increasingly over time and seemingly overwhelmingly, there were pro-Second Amendment comments or pro-free market comments that banks should not be discriminating, picking, winners and losers and making policy choices. That's for the legislature. So we will now, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency has to go through all of the comments and take them into account as part of the Administrative Procedure Act. And then presumably we'll publish a final rule in the near term. I'm sure they've been going through the comments as they come in and not waiting till they all end. NSSF submitted comments. A couple of manufacturers, distributors, and retailers have, and other industries, not just the firearms industry, because the rule is not specific to firearms discrimination, but all industries. So, oil, coal, animal agriculture, mining, and others, private prisons, have all been impacted by this discrimination, really the privatization of Operation Choke Point. So we hope that the acting comptroller of the currency, Brian Brooks, will move forward with the rule and finalize it before the end of the administration. The acting controller has been nominated to be confirmed by the Senate as controller. We certainly hope that Leader McConnell will proceed with that. The banking committee will proceed with that, and he will be confirmed. But the fact that he's acting doesn't prevent him from finalizing this rule. Maxine Waters, who chairs the House Financial Services Committee, and other anti-gun Democrats have sent a letter opposing the proposed rule and threatening to repeal it if it's ever enacted. But that's not up to her, and I don't think she could get that through a divided Congress. Again, back to see what happens in Georgia. But it's really a very important issue, not just for our industry, but it really is important for the proper functioning of a democracy. These public policy choices should not be made in ivy towers by unelected board members caving to pressure from the social justice warriors. Because, today it's firearms, tomorrow it's whatever becomes the disfavored industry du jour by these individuals that are trying to affect legislation through policy choices by corporations. And that is really not very good for democracy.
Absolutely.
It's certainly not good for your constitutional rights.
Yeah, you got that right. Larry Keane, Senior Vice President, General Counsel at the National Shooting Sports Foundation. Listen, I appreciate you coming on the program today. I know we're going to be talking quite a bit during 2021, but best wishes in the new year. And if you have any line on ammunition, just let me know. Just, my email address. Always looking out for an extra box or two.
Yes. Well, as soon as I get mine.
I was going to say, I bet you get that question a lot these days. Larry, thank you as always, man. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon. I do appreciate Larry joining us on the program. I'm sure he's going to be back in just a few weeks. We'll probably be checking in with him, towards the end of the month, or at least early February when we get the NICS numbers for January of 2021. But I will say I have to agree with Larry. I don't see this really changing anytime soon. Now, what might change over the course of the next 5 or 6 months is that the ammunition supply, I think, is gradually going to get better. If we have no more curveballs, right? I mean, if we have an asteroid that starts coming towards Earth or a zombie invasion, obviously that's going to change things. But if we have no more curveballs thrown our way, I think that the ammunition supply is going to gradually get better. I don't think it's going to be a matter of, flipping a switch and all of a sudden things get back to normal. But the manufacturers are ramping up their supply as much as they can. Over the course of 2021, you may even see some of these manufacturers decide, all right, we are going to bring another factory online. It's going to take us 18 months to build it, but we believe that this demand is now going to be sustained to the point that it makes sense for us to go ahead and build out our capacity. But what they're doing right now, they're running 24/7. They're bringing on more employees, but as Larry said, that takes time to train those employees up. So I suspect that things are going to get slightly better over the course of 2020, as far as the ammunition availability is concerned, slightly and gradually better. That's the most optimism that I can muster at the moment. All right, let's turn our attention to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, as well as our recidivist report. We'll start there with a story out of Colorado, where a man from Pueblo arrested for shooting 2 sheriff's deputies, made a first court appearance. According to authorities, this guy, well known to local law enforcement, he's actually, Eddie Lovins is his name. He's 48 years old. He allegedly shot at 2 deputies on New Year's Day. By the way, both of these deputies expected to make a recovery, even though one was hit in the head. The deputies were conducting a welfare check after receiving a call from the Tennessee Highway Patrol. Lovins is accused of making threats against the Highway Patrol in Tennessee, as well as making threats against the Capitol building in Tennessee. So now he's facing 2 counts of first-degree attempted murder, 2 counts of first-degree assault on a peace officer. He's due back in court in Pueblo County, Colorado on Thursday morning. But Fox 21 in Colorado reports that he had 2 previous run-ins with law enforcement. Back in 2015, Lovins was charged with harassment, third-degree assault, telephone obstruction, and false imprisonment after beating his fiancée in Durango, Colorado. Yeah. Lovins pleaded guilty, and after 1 year of probation, the charges were dismissed. He pled guilty to beating his girlfriend, and he literally got a slap on the wrist. He threw a punch, he got a slap on the wrist. And after a year of keeping his nose clean as far as law enforcement was concerned, his probation dropped. He was free to go about his business. 2017, just shortly after his probation was revoked, or I shouldn't say revoked, shortly after he completed the term of his probation, Lovins was arrested on a felony menacing charge in Pueblo County. In that case, he didn't have to plead guilty. The charge was simply dropped. Here we are now, about 3, maybe 4 years later, and Lovin facing again 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder on a peace officer, as well as 2 counts of first-degree assault there in Colorado. Our armed citizen story of the day from Amarillo, Texas, where a homeowner shot and killed 2 burglary suspects on Monday morning. This is from KFDA in Amarillo. It was about 5:15 in the morning. Officers called to a home there in Amarillo on reports of suspicious activity. Officers found 2 people dead in the home. Detectives investigating learned that the homeowner confronted one of the people committing a burglary. Then the suspect attacked the homeowner. The 2 began fighting. Homeowner armed with a handgun. Police say the second person tried to assault the homeowner, and that is when the homeowner shot the suspects in fear for his life. 27-year-old Jesus Antonio Maldonado, 43-year-old Anthony Garon Adams, both pronounced deceased at the scene. Detectives interviewed the homeowner, later released him. The case will be presented to a grand jury, remains under investigation, but at this point, all signs point towards self-defense. We'll try to keep our eyes open for any developments and updates in that story out of Amarillo. And finally today, our good deed of the day from New York State, out on Long Island, where Suffolk police say one of their own, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing to save a couple whose home was engulfed in flames. This was Saturday afternoon. According to officers in Suffolk, Officer Sean Coletta went inside the burning home and found 55-year-old Robert Baker and 51-year-old Deborah Baker trying to save their two dogs. Deborah Baker told News 12 that a woman had called 911 moments after the flames started, and her husband sprinted next door to get all three people, including their tenant, out of the building. But she says she and her husband noticed their two dogs were still in the burning home, and they went in after them. Officer got the couple outside, then attempted to rescue one of the animals. Obviously, in that stressful situation, the dog freaked out, ended up biting the officer. He was taken to the hospital for treatment of smoke inhalation as well as the dog bite. Shortly after, firefighters showed up. They rescued one of the dogs. The second dog actually made it out on its own. So everybody, humans, animals alike, out of that burning home. Deborah Baker says there was actually an explosion in the house right after everyone escaped. So, I mean, this is scary stuff. They haven't determined the cause of the fire. But again, Sean Coletta, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing to rescue Robert and Deborah Baker from that burning residence there in, where was this, Selden, New York. Appreciate your very good deed, Officer Coletta. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. We will be back tomorrow, however, with more of the latest Second Amendment news and information. In fact, tomorrow we're going to be talking to my old friend, Nikki Gozer. If you don't know Nikki, she is the executive director of the Crime Prevention Research Center. She is a tireless Second Amendment advocate, and she got involved in her Second Amendment activism under the worst of circumstances. Her beloved husband, Ben, was murdered right in front of her by a guy who had been stalking Nikki. And this happened, by the way, in a gun-free zone. Nikki Gozer had her concealed carry license, but she was not allowed at the time under Tennessee law to bring her lawfully owned firearm inside of the sports bar where she and her husband were running their mobile karaoke business. She was required to be disarmed. Her stalker ignored the gun-free zone, brought a gun into that sports bar, and in front of Nikki, shot and killed the man she loved. Now, this guy was ultimately convicted. He was sentenced to 23 years behind bars. But he didn't stop trying to get to Nikki Gozer, even from behind a prison cell. He wrote her letters. For years, he wrote her letters that Nikki never received because she had told her attorney at the time, she's like, I don't want to, if he tries to contact me, I don't want to see it. Apparently he had done this really early on, like before he was even sentenced. And prosecutors just weren't really interested in the fact that the man who killed Nikki Gozer's husband was trying to contact her, telling her he loved her, how he'd be waiting for her, even if she found somebody else. They didn't apparently see anything wrong with that. I'm guessing you see something wrong with that. I see something wrong with it too. Well, after it was discovered that this guy had been continuing to write Nikki Gozer for years behind a prison cell, Nikki wanted justice. She wanted some action to be taken. And now, thankfully, the U.S. attorney there in Nashville has charged the man who killed Nikki Gozer's husband with basically male stalking, which comes with a 5-year federal prison sentence. That's the good news. The bad news is that the man who killed Nikki Gozer's husband is still getting credit for good behavior behind bars. Yeah. Meaning that 23-year sentence isn't going to be a 23-year sentence, even though he has not been on his best behavior while he's been incarcerated. We're going to get to the bottom of this with Nikki Gozer on tomorrow's program. I encourage you to check it out. If you've never heard Nikki's story, she is an amazing woman. This is an incredibly, this is one of our recidivist reports come to life. This is it. And I hope that in talking to Nikki, we can help get some justice here. And I hope that you'll be a part of that effort as well. So we'll do that tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget, you can always subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube. That way you'll never miss a program. Also on rumble.com, we're Bearing Arms Cam and Company. If you want the audio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Amazon Podcasts as well. We certainly do appreciate your support and you spreading the word. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll be back tomorrow with more. But until then, be well, be safe, be free. And we'll see you soon with more Bearing Arms Cam and Company.